In a world where drinking alcohol is encouraged as a coping tool for difficult parenting moments, staying sober and raising kids is definitely a challenge. Each age group comes with its own conflicts and struggles, but many parents find the teen years, in particular, to be emotionally exhausting. If you're in recovery, chances are you already have a hard time managing emotion sometimes. Add the stress of teenagers to the mix, and it can really throw you for a loop. On the other hand, though, your recovery gives you an incredible opportunity to show up for your kids. In today's episode, we are chatting with Amos, Seija, and Robbie about how their sobriety has affected their parenting and what they've learned since showing up sober for their teens.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full, there's no space left for alcohol.
We would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. If you're a sober parent, you know how helpful it can be just to know you're not alone in this whole parenting adventure. Come join the conversation on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Through the Glass Recovery or in our Facebook group called Recovery Your Way. We would love for you to share your experience and chat with our other listeners. All right. Hello and welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast. This is episode 130, and we are hanging out with some really cool folks today. Really looking forward to having this conversation. And I'm going to let Robbie introduce himself first because he's been here enough that he knows how this goes. So go for it, Robbie. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. I'm Robbie, live in Rapid City, South Dakota. I've been sober for 789 days. I am a co-host of a podcast called Golden Hour Adventures, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Tell us about Golden Hour Adventures.
Yes.
So Julie was on Golden Hour Adventures if you'd like to listen to her episode. We are an endurance-based podcast. Our motto is everyday people doing extraordinary things. We have conversations with runners, hikers, skiers, fishermen, fisherwomen, I guess, too. Any type of people that like to go on adventure. We just want to put their story out there and let people hear it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic podcast. Definitely suggest you guys check it out. There's actually, it's not necessarily intentional, I don't think, but there tends to be a little bit of a recovery theme woven into a lot of the different stories that I've listened to on there.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting that it just came, I mentioned my recovery on there a few times, and we just got people that were in recovery that wanted to be guests on there. So it's been pretty awesome to share that with other people in the endurance world too.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, make sure you check the links in our show notes and you'll find the link to Robbie's podcast there so you guys can check it out. Yeah, good to have you, Robbie. And next up is Amos. You want to tell us about yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Amos. I am from, Graham New Brunswick. It's a little island out eastern Canada. I have 865 days sober, and I'm the newbie here today. This is my first time, so looking forward to it. And I met up with you guys almost a little over a year ago. So
Yeah.
We were just talking about that the other day, and it's like, wow, we've known him for quite a long time now.
It is so cool. So yeah, just so you guys know, Amos actually found us and joined the meetings that we host on Monday nights. And so that's how we got to know him. And we definitely encourage you guys, if you're looking for any kind of support, especially virtually, come join us on Monday nights. You can hang out with Robbie and Amos and me and Steve and a whole bunch of other people that are all just doing this sober thing. All right. And last but not least, we've got Seija. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing well. My name is Seija. My sobriety date is April 10th of 2015. And I am currently in the Denver metro area. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. I do a lot of recovery work with women's sober livings, a lot of work with single moms in recovery because that's how it started for me. And I'm really grateful to be here. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks
She's
for
coming
being
up on
here.
10 years. 10 years in
Crazy.
I was just like 2015, where it's math, 10 years. You got like 3 months left.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So cool.
10 year, it's coming up soon. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, really happy to have you. We have followed your Instagram for a couple years now, and it's always so inspiring to see some of the stuff that you do. So, really excited that we get to hang out with you today. Yeah. So, when we look back on conversations that we've had here about stress, one of the biggest causes of stress comes from parenting teenagers. And of course, parenting in general comes with all kinds of challenges, but it seems like the teen years in particular bring about a lot of difficult emotions. For many of us, those difficult emotions used to be the perfect reason to have a drink. So now that you're not drinking, what have you learned when it comes to parenting your teenagers when you don't have alcohol as an escape from the tough stuff?
Hmm.
Anybody's welcome to dive in and we'll just have a conversation.
I will start if that's okay. I was thinking about it this morning. My kids are 23, 19, and 14. So they were 13, 9, and 4 when I got sober. This morning, I dropped them off at the airport with my ex-husband because his dad's health is quickly failing. Like in the last month, they told him he has 2 to 4 months to live. So aside from that hard situation, I think one of the best gifts of sobriety has been able to parent my teenagers sober. My oldest was, just a brand new teenager. I got sober when he had turned 13 in December. And he really struggled from about 15 to 18. On April 10th of 2018, when it was my 3 year, I got a call from the Boulder County Sheriff that he was at the hospital and had overdosed. And I remember driving there and I was angry that I was going, I'm like, this is my day. I took the day off work. Every year I take the day off work and just go get outside and all of that. And then as I like came up Highway 36 and saw all the mountains in front of me, I just thought like, I am so grateful I get to show up sober today. And, we've gone through a lot of really hard things, death, divorce, all kinds of stuff. And being able to hear my kids, especially my daughter, say things like, she'll call me. She would call me when she was in high school at, 10 o'clock on a Friday night and say, can you come pick us up, please? So and so's mom can't drive us home. And I really don't ever want to take that for granted that I get to be that safe parent today because I just wasn't before.
For me, my daughter's 14, and I'm so happy to share the space with you guys because it sounds like we're all single parents here. Um, this is something new I'm navigating. I got divorced in 2014. My ex-wife decided to move to Texas, and my daughter didn't want to go, so she moved in with me. Uh, I was always the fun dad uh, because of our visitation. It was like a vacation when she would come and hang out with me. We'd go do fun stuff. Then she moved in with me, and it's been different. Now I have to be the whole parent and the dad and learning how to navigate that. And I am so grateful that I'm sober. I don't think it would have ever happened if I was not sober, but I know if this did happen and I was not sober, I'd be in a horrible place. I would not be there. I would not be present. I would be using it even more just because of the stress of not knowing how to be a parent. This is a learning experience for me. My daughter's 14. She's going through all those changes. She, feels abandoned by her mom, as she rightfully should. She doesn't want to have any type of relationship with her mother right now. And I have to navigate that with her. I have to be the person that says it's okay if you don't want to talk to your mom. And I have to be, the asshole sometimes and say, stop talking to your mom. I thought I'd never be in that place where I'd have to tell my kid to stop talking to their parent, but I find myself there quite frequently. Um, and for me, I just know if I was not sober, I would be a wreck. I would be a total wreck. I just know how my brain works now, and any little thing that would go wrong, I would use. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes wrong. There's a lot of stuff that goes good, but it's, as you guys know, it's an up and down roller coaster every single day. Um, Sometimes things are great, sometimes things are horrible, and I'm trying to figure out how to get back up the hill to be present and stay sane myself as trying to navigate, my 14-year-old daughter through this.
It's hard not to take on their emotions, at least for me. When my kid is upset, when she's hurting, when, she's gone through a breakup with a boyfriend or when she is, being treated badly by friends or whatever, I have to really watch that I'm not actually absorbing those emotions and taking them on myself because like goodness knows I have enough of my own. But I think that's just a natural thing, and I don't know if that's just empathy or if that's some version of enmeshment or whatever it is, but I really have to take a step back, like, I can start feeling her weight bearing down on me too. So just learning how to show up with her and
Mhm.
show up for her without, without actually also being burdened by the same feelings is I mean, it's just it's a practice, right? It's not something that I just like, poof, I learned that skill. I really have to watch myself in those situations where she is experiencing something big because like these teenagers, those feelings get huge. And like it's just so easy to get sucked into it with them, especially because I mean most of us don't have a whole lot of coping skills of our own, right? So, that's been one thing that I've learned is I mean I need you to have your emotions over there and I'll walk alongside you, but I'm not going to let them take me over also.
Mm,
Yeah,
I
I've
can
noticed.
relate.
Oh, go ahead, Amos.
No, go ahead, buddy.
I was gonna say, I can relate with that. It's like I can feel her her feelings and emotions, and me being the people pleaser, I want to fix them. But who ends up being the hurt one? Both of us. I'm hurt that she's not happy, and I'm hurt, and she's hurt that she's not happy. But then I get frustrated and I get angry because I can't fix the problem, and that has been so hard for me. And she'll say, "Well, why are you talking to me like this?" I'm like, "She's never seen that side of me." Being authoritative to her, and now I have to be. And she's like, "Why are you talking to me like this?" I'm like, "I'm being authoritative with you." Then, of course, it's all downhill from there, but I just walk away at that point.
Mhm.
It's such a learning point and like trying to navigate through it. I just thank God it was over, right? I can relate a lot with you, Robbie. Uh, I got a 12-year-old daughter who's, about to turn 19, in 2 months. So her whole world is like, ah, crazy right now. So,
Uh-huh.
um, being sober, and being present it's amazing. I don't think same thing. I don't think I could do it if I was still, uh, under the influence. I wouldn't be the dad I am today. And I'm nowhere near perfect, but I'm learning and I'm taking that step every day. And one of the things that humbles me is that my daughter's going to teach me how to be a dad. Like, the things that I mess up, I can see it in her. I can see her reaction, and it's like, "Ooh, okay. No, we're not going to do that anymore." Like, we're not, we'll find a different way to communicate. We'll find a different way to navigate through this because you're a 13-year-old girl, and I've never been a 13-year-old girl. So I'm kind of lost here, but definitely being sober, it's brought many opportunities. And he came to live with me last year. I had her come, and stuff was going on with her mother, and she needed that safe spot, so she came and lived with me, and that was awesome. That was exciting, and the excitement was, followed up by the reality of what it really was. Parent and a teenager. It had its challenges, but it's just nice to be able to be present. like when she's going through something and she calls me, I can pick up the phone and I can talk through whatever she's going through, right? To the best of my ability. Um, and she watches very keenly. Like everything I do, she's always watching. She talks about things that I've said or choices that I've made. And then we had a conversation about boys and stuff. And she said, "Dad, I want to wait till I'm older. I want to wait till I'm like 17, 18, and I want to wait for the right one." And she's like, "And I don't want to drink." She's like, "I don't want to do anything like that." She's like, "I don't want to party." And I was just like, "Man, like you're melting your father's heart right now. It's just awful."
Did you tell her she could wait till she's 30 instead of 7?
But then I had to have the reality talk. I was like, like those are great choices, and I'll be there to help you through every single one of them. But it's going to be tough. It's just the way life is. But it's conversations that I would have never had with my daughter, right? Like I would have avoided that conversation altogether. Be like, yeah, dad's going to the bar, dad's gonna go have a drink, or that's too much for me. So
Yeah. I'm
Well.
gonna piggyback on that one right there. You're talking about the conversations. I don't have any teenage kids. My kids are 7 and 9, 8 and 9. So they're still they're not even going on 13 yet. So I'm still good there. But you talk about having those conversations with your kids and what they look like beforehand and what they look like now, and those fun conversations. The ones that are fulfilling, like the one you're talking about. I'm venturing a guess that Julie, Robbie, and Seija have experiences just like that.
Mhm. I've kind of so I have a 22-year-old and I have a 17-year-old. I'm like almost 3.5 years sober. I have parented one teenager all the way through while drinking heavily. And I've parented one teenager now since she was 14 sober. And so I've done it both ways. And I can't even tell you how much easier it is to do this sober. And it's not just the without the alcohol part, right? Like obviously alcohol is just like pouring gasoline on a fire and teenagers are just constant little fires. But like like all of the internal work that I've done, all of the recovery work that I've done and the emotional healing that I've done has allowed me to show up in a way for my youngest that actually creates space for the conversations like what Steve's talking about. With my oldest, I didn't have the capacity to have a conversation like that. I didn't have the awareness. I didn't understand how to deal with my own emotions, let alone how to deal with theirs. And so my focus and this is something that I've looked back on and it feels really shitty to say, but I feel like it needs to be said because I don't think I'm the only parent that's done this. Most of their childhood, I was basically using my kids as a way to make myself feel good about myself. So I was homeschooling them and they were really well educated, and that made me feel like I had more value as a mom. When they behaved well in public, they made me look good, which meant I had more value. And that is a horrible way to raise children. And I didn't know any better. I think that's how my husband was raised. And so he did the same thing. It's like, yeah, I remember telling him one time, like, I feel like my worth as a woman comes from how my kids turn out, whether or not they turn out the way that they're quote unquote supposed to. And he's like, well, yeah, like he agrees. He's like, absolutely, that's where your worth comes from because that's all he ever knew too. And so I think a lot of us as parents, and I don't know if it's dads as much as moms, that I can't speak for the men, but that a lot of women, it's like my kids have to turn out the way society says they have to turn out in order for me to have worth and value as a mother. And that's how they grew up. There was no focus on connection. There was no focus on helping them really understand who they were, what their values were, what was important to them, letting them find their way into their like authentic young selves, right? It was just all about be who you're supposed to be, which is exactly what I got when I was a teenager. So that's exactly what I gave them. And that it destroyed my relationship with my parents when I was a teenager. It destroyed my oldest kiddo's relationship with me when they were a teenager also. And this second time around with my youngest, I have so let that go. I don't need to prove my worth anymore to anybody for any reason. And so I can just let her come into her own. I can let her show up authentically. We have some of the coolest conversations about really real stuff that I never could have handled before. And so I guess just being able to look back and compare with all my heart, like my greatest regret in the entire world is not having shown up for my oldest the way that I've been able to with my youngest. That is heartbreaking to me that one kid got the best of me and one didn't, because it seems so painfully unfair. And there's nothing I can do to go back and change that.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you just said, Julie. Again, I don't know if it's because of the mom part or just parent or just woman in recovery, but what I feel like I've learned most is that I can't go back and change how my oldest, he was only 13, but he remembers, finding me outside laying in the morning, passed out on the deck, or throwing up in the backyard, or, all these things. And when he struggled, I really worked hard to not enable him and to make sure he was held accountable. And then, as soon as he turned 18, everything just shifted with him. And he just got on a path where he really was trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted to do. And several times he will say to me out of nowhere, Mom, I really appreciate how you didn't let me get away with things and made me acknowledge what I was doing was wrong and take the consequences. And then, a couple times he's come in the kitchen. Just, some of the best conversations we have are while I'm making dinner, and he'll come in the kitchen, and out of nowhere one day he said, Lincoln is my youngest. He's 14. And he said, how cool is it that Lincoln does not ever remember you drinking? Isn't that neat? He gets to grow up. So he doesn't look at it from this place of resentfulness and anger. And I didn't get that. And I think the conversations we have had are from my perspective, when I was able to do better, I am trying to do better. And in the meantime, I did the best I could with what I had at the time. And, my youngest, I have that same kind of relationship you were sharing about. My youngest is just a different kind of kid anyway. He's just, I'm really grateful for the relationship that I get to have with all three of my kids today. Absolutely all just benefits and gifts and, circumstances of being sober. But one time when Lincoln was 10, I was making dinner and he came in the kitchen next to me and he said, Mom, totally out of nowhere. And he said, if you drank again, you'd probably die, right? And I was like, hey, how you doing? Yeah. Like, and I said, you're probably right, but I don't ever want to try to test that. And, when I got sober, I was going through a divorce. I was fighting with all I had to keep my kids in the state of Colorado. I was doing everything I could. And I got sober so that I didn't lose them. And I stayed sober because I had lost myself. And, in the process of doing work and sharing with other people, especially, in forums like this, I've realized that no one could get me or keep me sober. I couldn't even do it myself. Why would I expect it people will always say, my kids are my why. And I always reply with, if I ever relapsed, I would never want my kids to think that they weren't good enough or strong enough or worthy enough to keep me sober. My sobriety is my responsibility and they get to reap the benefits of that as well. And I feel like I couldn't even imagine going through the teenage years with them, with what we've all experienced, especially during COVID, but all of it, drinking, it's such a gift, and they come and hear me speak every year when I celebrate and, see the same people who have known them since they were little, and they've built relationships with those people too, and, I don't know, this morning, I'll share about this morning because it's on just happened 5 hours ago, but, you know, I did not have a good relationship with my ex-husband's parents. They were not kind to me at the end of my drinking, and frankly, I didn't deserve to be treated kindly. But this week has been really hard for my kids to kind of process all of this. They're just learning that their dad, who's 74, or grandpa is gonna die. And so we've had some really hard conversations, and um, I said to them, I work in senior living, and I said, if you need a place for him to go out there, I can connect you with people. And my daughter and my youngest overheard me talking and came in the kitchen and they said, can you believe you actually want to help them? Isn't that so interesting? And I said, sometimes we get to do the right thing because we are good people and we get to show other people how to be good too. And, it, I don't know. Those conversations are so meaningful to me today because I get to show up in ways, the last thing I wanted to do is have my ex-husband over here 3 times this week, sitting in my kitchen, figuring out flights, but I get to be present for those things. And more so, I get to show my kids that I can be present for that too.
You get to try and be an example. Like, this is something I've heard from all of you, is that you get to try and be a healthy example of what is right and what is wrong and how to go about dealing with whatever life throws at you without being afraid to talk about it. One of the things that was difficult for me, even growing up, it was trying to talk about that stuff without it being like a loaded gun or having it be thrown back in my face in a way where I couldn't speak the way that I'm hearing these conversations you guys are having with your kids, and how grateful you are that your kids feel like they're safe enough to have those kind of conversations with. Anytime I get to spend time with my kids, I try and be very open and honest about where I'm at. And when they're struggling with something, I try and give them the space to speak about it. Because even watching them, I can see that they're afraid to take the space and say how they feel. I have one kid that has no problem. She'll just give it to you and see what happens. And I have another kid who's very closed off, who, when it comes time to express what she feels and what she wants, it comes out in a different way, and then it comes out in frustration. And then I have the capacity to deal with that frustration without taking it personally.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like I get to show up best for my kids right now, is when they have a fit or they are struggling and they're going through something. I can step right back now, and I know it's not about me. Even if I've made a mistake, I can still own it and be okay with it. I can still apologize to them, which they deserve, and be okay with that and make a personal change. And
The
go ahead. Go ahead.
You talked about 2 things that just came up for me when you were talking. So the first is you get to be an example, and maybe the best example that I can show my kid now is how messy it is and how much it's okay that it's messy. All I ever saw from my parents was like they made everything just look so simple and so easy, and it didn't seem like there were ever any problems. And so I felt like if things were hard for me, there was something wrong with me. And so when I'm navigating any tough situation, I'm pretty open and honest about it. I remember there was a time where we were headed into a group. It was like a 4-H meeting kind of thing. And I was talking to her and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so insecure right now. I'm so worried about what all of these other parents are going to think of me when I have to stand up and speak in front of them. Like I could say those words. And doing that then makes it okay for her to tell me, later she got a job and she was like, I feel really insecure around all of the other girls that work there. They're all so pretty. And I feel like I'm comparing myself to them. And like, I couldn't have put words together like that and said them out loud when I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
But the fact that I can, as the parent, I can put those words out there and let her know this is how I feel. I'm going to walk into this situation. It's going to be what it is, and I'll handle my feelings. Then she can kind of do the same thing, and just talking about it helps so much. And then the other thing, Steve, that you said, taking things personally, like when a 17-year-old girl is snotty and bratty and rude and says really snarky things to you, it's not at all about you. It really isn't. But with my oldest, I would always take it personally. It would always be, well, they hate me, or I screwed up here, or I shouldn't have done this. And I would make it all about myself and dump like this whole pile of shame on myself when really it's just like a bad day, right? Or it was hormones, or it was just didn't sleep enough the night before, or whatever it was that I liked to and I'm totally still guilty of this. Like I like to make it all about me. I like to somehow make myself the problem. And I have to talk myself down. But I think that's a really important point because a lot of times when we react to them and their emotions, a lot of times it's because we're taking it personally.
Yeah, that's something I'm learning not to take it personal. I'm getting there, but like I was saying earlier, being the people pleaser, I want to fix everything. So of course, if I can't fix something, I'm going to take it personal. And that's what really drove my addiction was taking stuff personal to go use. I was really good at that. You know, whatever I could find to tell myself the story that I was worthless or having a bad day or whatever it was to go use was my crutch. So now trying to rewire that part of my mind where if something does go wrong, with my daughter, it's a little different than if it's at work because that rewiring was a little easier to do with other situations. But when it's that close and like that sensitive to me, um, it's still something I'm trying to navigate and figure out. Uh, I'll get better at it, I know, uh, as things come and go. But that's one of the hardest things for me is not taking it personal.
I was thinking when Julie and Steve were sharing about conversations with your kids, and it just made me think like when I experience something hard and my kids see me go through that, like my dad died 5 days before I had a year of sobriety. And that was probably the hardest thing I went through in the first year at least. And he was 35 years sober. And, everything from then, I think that being able to show them not just the emotional part of it, but have those conversations and show them that I don't have to numb or drown or isolate my way through things. Like having those conversations again, and like Julie was sharing, I'm the fifth of six girls. So when my daughter would do things like you shared, like even just noises like I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna blow a gasket in a second." But I would always think, "Okay, my mom did this with 6 of us. I can handle 1." Um, but it just makes me realize, like, I never had those conversations as a kid, and being able to open that door to, like, have them come in and say, "I had a really hard day. Oh, yeah? Do you wanna talk about it? Yeah, no, I'm okay." Okay, and let it go. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to problem solve for them. They know that I'm here and I'm present, and my door is always open. If they wanna come and sit on my bed and talk to me, this morning they all gave me hugs as they were leaving, and, I just kept thinking, like, I wouldn't have anywhere close to the relationships I have with my kids today if I wasn't sober.
One other thing that Saya said earlier that kind of I don't know, I think this might be interesting for everybody to speak on for just a second, but, Saya, you mentioned, like, you have your group of people that have watched your kids grow up, and I know for me with my youngest, she has friendships built now, really meaningful friendships built with the people that are in my recovery community. I mean, I remember the first year that I was getting sober, Steve and I were on Zoom a lot of the time, especially, starting a podcast and stuff. And she would just come sit on Zoom and hang out with me and Steve. And then eventually it got to where like she'd be like, "Mom, I need to talk to Steve for a little bit because he's not you." And so then she could just sit and have somebody, and it felt so good to know that she's talking to somebody who is safe, who, can really show up for her. And then I remember we had a whole bunch of us in my living room or, a whole bunch of sober people in my living room talking. about whatever. And she came home, I think, from work.
Mm-hmm.
And she walked in, and it was like this whole drama thing with a boyfriend and another girl, and I don't even remember the whole story. But she's trying to figure out what to do, and you know how it is when you're 16 years old, and it all feels really big and important and stuff. And she came in and she sat down in front of all of my friends, and she's like, "Okay, here's the story." And she tells everybody her thing that she's going through. And then she gets, like, the best feedback, right? She doesn't it's just, like, the healthiest, most emotionally intelligent feedback that she gets from everybody. And then she's like, "I hate sober people. You guys are always right."
And telling the truth, right?
They're telling that, like, they're not gonna say what she wants to hear, but anyway, I think it's super cool that, we have this open conversation about sobriety and recovery, that it is all a normal part of her life, that she can be like, "Ugh, sober people," because it's just something that is there. And so I guess I would also love to hear if any of you wanna share, like, what's it like talking about sobriety and recovery and using and all of that with your teenagers? Because I'm guessing all of us have had really open conversations, and I think that's something that probably a lot of our listeners who have teenagers wonder, like, how do we what's that supposed to look like, and how much are you
Mm.
supposed to tell your kids? So if anybody wants to chime in there.
I'll chime in on this one. It's very interesting with my daughter. Uh, she knows that I've been sober for a couple of years, and she really has this hard time sometimes where I think that I was always so high that she didn't know that I was high. She just thought that was normal dad. And she didn't realize I had a problem. She didn't know. And, I told her that I have a problem. And she goes, "But you were always okay." And the people that she didn't see that were okay were people that were, really drunk or high and negatively doing something, where I was something positive still, even though I was using. And we have these conversations. I didn't hide anything from my daughter. I got high in front of her. I got drunk in front of her. I didn't hide anything from her. So in my recovery, I've been a open book, and we're having this discussion about vape pens, and she thought it was a nicotine vape pen, and I'm like, no, I've never used a nicotine vape pen. It was always cannabis. She's like, what? That was weed? I'm like, yeah, it was always weed. And she's like, oh, I just thought that was nicotine. So it's this weird thing with me and her where I think when she gets older, she'll see the difference, but she still doesn't recognize that I had a problem. But now she sees a difference that I'm present, and I'm kind of the asshole now because I'm present and I care about her and I want everything to be right for her. As before, she would have meetings or whatever, and I wouldn't be present to talk to her teachers or anything like that. I'd just show up and, just try to get through it so I could go back to the car and get high or drunk type of thing. And I remember last year we were at her school meeting her teachers, and she's like, "Why do you want to talk to every one of my teachers?" I was like, "Because I want to know who your teachers are." And I saw that look in her face like, "Oh, now he cares." And, when I I tell her, this is whatever I told her, it was 2 years, and she's like, "Oh, that's cool." But I guess it's kind of hard for me because I lived that way all the time. She didn't, and I guess I didn't act out bad enough for her to realize that I had a problem. But it also hurts me knowing that I lived that way and she thought it was okay, and that's who I was, if that makes sense. So now, whatever questions she asks, or, sometimes I'll just barf up a bunch of whole stuff because I want to tell her because she needs to hear sometimes. So that's kind of where we're at. And it makes me, feel good that she's asked me some questions about, alcohol and other stuff. And, she's told me that she's tried it and that kind of stuff. So we've had that conversation. She's 14, but, it's when I look back, when I was that age, the first time I ever had a drink, I was 9 years old. I was still in the empty beer bottles from the party the night before that my parents had. So I don't I don't get angry. I just talk about, what could happen and all that stuff and be very honest with her. So that's just another, like, I didn't have that rock bottom moment where she saw dad doing something so horrible that it affected her. It's just, that's who dad was.
I've had that conversation too with my daughter. When I got sober, I was on anxiety medication because of all the things I was taking with liquor, and it kind of took a toll on my body. So I take the anxiety medication. It says do not drink on it, and I was like, well, that's not an option. So mixing everything, it would make me black out. And it's a common side effect of it. So I asked her, I was like, what do you remember about it? And she would hear stories because people bring up stories because I was a fool. I was, a jester, joker or whatever, jester. I just always try to make people laugh, and it didn't matter. There was no line I wouldn't cross to try to do it. Anyway, and then her thing was she'd oh, Dad, she's like, you'd sit us all down, her and my stepdaughters, and you'd have a talk with us, and you'd be like, in life, you want to feed the homeless, you want to take care of people, you want to be nice, right? And she'd laugh as she's telling me. So it was kind of not great to, it's not a great example, but I'm glad that she doesn't remember any of the bad stuff, because when I black out, or sometimes I wasn't very nice, I'd say hurtful things sometimes, but to her, it was that's been Fun Facts with Dad. Tune in next week. I cock out, but I just I still, want to be the wise parent and try to navigate through that to make sure that there's no blockage there, that there is something that might have happened, or, she might have seen something that is scarring, and, it's just, and I know it'll all come because we're sober, right? As long as we stay sober and trust the process and continue to navigate through that, then.
That's one thing that scares me is I remember a lot of horrible conversations with my dad when he was drunk and super high on cocaine. They're I can go back right now and still remember how I feel. And I was very young, 9 and 10. And, hearing you say that, Amos, is just that could be ingrained, in our kids' head forever, what they saw of us. And I know it is with me, with my dad. And it's just what it is. I don't forgive him for it, nor should I, because that's just what it was. He chose to do that. But we as parents now, being sober, get to change that and make it right. And if we did do something like that, we need to have a talk about it. And I think that's a really good point. Is I've asked my daughter the same thing. Do you remember when I was really drunk? And she has a few times yeah, I had to come find you at the bar, and I was on my bike. I'm like, what did we do after that? She's like, well, we went home. And, every year I want to ask her that same question and see where her brain goes, to see what it really did cause her.
Seija, you have 3 kids.
Yeah, I was just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now I was going to say, so what was that like for you? Because I'm sure there's some stories there.
Yeah, I was just thinking, really, my oldest is the only one who remembers me drinking, thankfully. My daughter really, I think, just remembers more of the hangover pieces of it, when I couldn't function or didn't want to function. But what I was thinking when Robbie was sharing was those are the living amends we get to make today. Having the tough conversations, sitting, not trying to fix things. Sometimes that's the greatest thing I can do with my kids, is just sit and listen. I think Julie shared that too. Just being able to say to them, how was your day? And actually listen. And, with my oldest, when he would say things to me talking about his brother not remembering me drink, I would say things like, well, do you remember when I was drinking? Do you remember, and he'd say things like, I just remember I'd open the fridge and there'd be a case of beer in there. And then 2 hours later, there were 2 left. And he's like, and it just didn't occur to me until I was older where they were actually going. Or, when I got sober, So we had lived out in Colorado for 8 months before I got sober. So I literally just isolated, got my older 2 off to school, and drank all day with my 4-year-old home. I didn't know anybody out here, and I didn't want to know anybody out here. So it was like the perfect geographical. And the interesting thing is, someone asked me once, do you feel like you had to be, move 1,000 miles door to door? It was exactly 1,000 miles away from home in order to really get completely broken down so that life could rebuild. And my kids will often say, can you imagine if we were still back in Illinois? Can you imagine if you were still drinking? Like, it just makes me so grateful. And even on the ride to the airport this morning, my ex-husband is sitting next to me in the passenger seat, and he filed for divorce when I was 3 weeks sober. And my kids were talking in the back seat about this podcast. Oh, Mom, don't you have something to do this morning? And, all this stuff. And my daughter said, Dad, can you believe it's been almost 10 years since Mom has been sober? And he's like, wow, is it really? And we're like having this conversation. I'm like, what the hell is going on right now? And not to mention, like, the last time the 5 of us were in a vehicle together, and as soon as I dropped them off, like, I could feel it in my throat. Like, those are the relationships I've worked really hard, not to gain back. I don't ever want what I had before. I want better. And, even with my ex-husband. So I think that's the biggest takeaway, that I feel like the tangible thing I can look at and go, I just get to show up differently. I get to make that living amends. I cannot fix what I did before April 10th of 2015. I can't fix any of that, but I can just move forward.
I think that
Mhm.
um, one of the most powerful things we can do for our kids, especially in the ways that we hurt them, is to open up space for them to tell us how that made them feel.
Mhm.
And that is the scariest, hardest thing to do as a parent. To say, I know that I hurt you. I want to give you space to tell me how that really affected you. And I remember when my therapist first suggested that I have that conversation with my kids. And I was like, there is absolutely no way that I had the strength to hear from their mouths the kind of pain that I caused. And, I was newly sober at that point. After I felt a little bit more solid and a little more secure and a little more emotionally able to handle things, I did start asking and opening up that space, what was this like for you? That is one of the best ways that we can offer our kids space to heal, because we can't take back what we did. There's nothing we can do. But we do have the power to give them the space to heal, and having that conversation is actually a really healing conversation for them. It's painful for us, but it gives them a little bit back of what it was that we took from them.
Mhm.
Um,
Got
Isn't that
one.
the
Oh, go ahead.
like? Oh, sorry. It's like, isn't that the goal? That, like, no matter where we came from, wherever what we did, we changed our lives, but like, to have our kids succeed us, to have our kids, go further than we could ever go, to be better. And I mean, the fact that we're sober, that's going to play a huge role in their lives. Like, I had a conversation with my daughter. There was a lot of like friendship between her and her mother, which is, it's cool, right? But it's not like, I had to have a conversation when she lived here, and I was like, Bria, I'm not your friend. I'm never going to be your friend ever. I was like, but I'm your dad, and that's a hell of a lot better. I was like, because now, like, I'll always love you no matter what, right? Unconditionally. It was like, I've got your back. Like, I'm always going to be here for you. But it's so much better than having a friend. And, you're my daughter and I'm your dad. Like, that's just how it is. And just having that conversation. And yeah, that's the goal. It's just to see them go further. It's just to succeed and try to make good on some, learn from our mistakes, hopefully.
I'm gonna piggyback on that right there and say you mentioned a little bit about this too. You said learn from our mistakes. One thing that we've all done here is learned a lot from our mistakes, and it's hard not to get angry when you know how to fix our kids' problems for them. I know the solution. I know how you can fix this. I know how you can stop your own pain.
Yeah.
Especially coming from a place of being able to figure out how we stopped ours. Yet, how hard is it to let go
Mhm.
and allow them to make their mistakes? And so what kind of lessons have you learned in your recovery that you get to share with them that help you let go, that help them make their mistakes?
Mm.
I feel like for me, the easiest way I can look at that is it's the same way as working with other women in recovery. I can't tell you the number of women I've started working with and then they relapse and I never hear from them again, or they just don't get it. And I want nothing more than to like strangle them, get them sober, get them to a year and a half. And but it's the same thing with my kids. They would miss all that growth. They would miss all the lessons that come with the pain. And it doesn't mean, pain is enjoyable, but being able to grow through those things, being able to have those conversations. When my oldest was struggling, it was 3 years of really hard conversations. It was 3 years of juvenile detentions, all kinds of things that both of my younger 2 got to learn from as well. And had I said to him when he first got in trouble, the courts gave me the opportunity to bring him home, call it a day, give him a slap on the wrist, but he would have missed out on all of that growth, and this is his journey, not mine. That's how it is for all 3 of my kids. I would rob them of those lessons if I just gave them to them, but instead I get to sit in it and say, "So what do you wanna do?" My daughter bought a car at the end of, um, December, her first car. All this and she's trying to navigate it and having a hard time with getting emissions, and I said, "So, if you want my help, I'm here. Otherwise, I can help you navigate it." And she figured it out, I don't know, I think that's the most tangible thing, learning to let go because that's how it worked for me in early recovery, learning to let go of giving other people the answers, the gifts, because I would have missed out on so much if people told me, you know, how I should need to do things and things would work out. I would have missed out on a lot of really good lessons.
I feel the same kind of way. It's like when my daughter told me, that she's tried alcohol and, weed, I'm like, okay, what did you learn from that? And, I didn't get angry with her. We had the conversation. Um, that was it. And, a lot of times with myself, people are like, well, if you could change anything, what would you do different? And I say, not a damn thing. You know, I want exactly how everything happened to go because I've learned from it. I don't have any regrets. And letting stuff go is so hard. Some things are easier than others, but some of the stuff that stings, like you're saying, we have to sit in it. And without us sitting in some of that stuff, I know I wouldn't be who I am today. And that is like the gift I can give my daughter is letting her know the struggle and how I got here. Um, that's it may not be pretty sometimes, but that's the way I'm here now and be able to be happy and, joyful. There was a lot of dark and scary times, especially with, her mother at the times and my father still today. But able to have that conversation and, you know, tell them, tell my daughter, yeah, I do not forgive my father for the stuff he's done to me, but I've moved on.
Mm.
That is something, that she will learn from and I hope will take with her for the rest of her life.
Amos?
Oh, I just think one of the greatest choices I think I've made that's helped my parenting or learning how to parent has nothing to do with being a parent whatsoever. It's just sobriety. Is like as things come up in my past, as things come up on my journey of healing and being sober, it's like I take it full force. Like I try to deal with something, right? So as I'm constantly dealing with all my stuff inside from with my sobriety, it's like I'm just becoming a better person. I'm beginning to love myself more. I'm beginning, to love my journey. And it's like she's benefited from that, right? It's like, and then I'm willing to learn how to be a dad. I'm willing to learn all this stuff, and it's humbling me enough. So yeah, it's like,
Julie?
yeah.
You got anything?
On letting go. Um, this is, I think, letting go is very much about what I can control and what I can't control. I want to, I think, and Saya said this too, like, well, and you all did, that I want to control my children into keeping them safe and keeping them happy and in protecting them from pain and all of the other things that we just don't want our kids to experience, right? Um, and understanding what I'm able to control, which is literally only myself. um, and going back to remembering that because as a parent, I think helplessness is a horrible feeling and you experience it all the time when you have a teenager. And getting to the point where you can accept that instead of try to drink that away, because I think helplessness is one of the most uncomfortable emotions that I experience. And, before I just drink it away every time. If I felt helpless, if I felt like I couldn't do something, it hurt so much that I would just drink that away. To get to the point where I can recognize this is out of my control. What can I do right now? And just take action on whatever that answer is. That's been the healthiest way, I think, for me to be able to let go of anything else.
Excellent. It is about control and what we can control and what we can't control. I'm going to wrap this up now, and I'm going to make this pretty quick. This was amazing conversation about parenting, teenagers, parenting in general, and recovery, and how those two intertwine and interloop and create better relationships and things. To sum this up, we get to show up. We get to be present.
Mm.
We get to give our kids independence because we learned how to figure that out on our own self. We get to give that back to them. We get to support, not fix. We get to teach them that asking for help is okay and that talking about hard things is okay too. I think that's one of those things that we all grew up not having a place to put it. And we're giving our children an opportunity and a safe place to put that because we know what that looks like. And we get to be flexible instead of being rigid and allowing them to grow and blossom while we're growing and blossoming. So I want to say thank you, Amos. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Seija, for taking the time and sharing your thoughts and experiences with us today. Really appreciate you guys' time.
Glad to be here.
Yep.
you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, or follow Through the Glass Recovery podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. We'll see you back here next Monday.